Hey guys, welcome to the Sim Racing Paddock. I'm William Marsh, and in this video we are going to be doing a head-to-head comparison. So in front of me you have Automobilista 2, one of the hotly anticipated sim racing titles, and we have quite a few questions still remaining with this beta still going on. One of them is, how does the physics compare to Automobilista 1? Also, is it kind of similar to Project Cars 2? Those are two questions on a lot of sim racers' minds, and I kind of wanted to address that in this video. So right now we have the Formula Classic version 1 that's kind of similar to the Lotus 98T, and we're at Brands Hatch. So we are actually going to be driving in this combo in 3 different titles. Granted, Project Cars 2 is going to be slightly different due to being different developers, but I'm trying to get as close as possible for us to be able to do a kind of comparison on the physics. So, without further ado, let's get the tires warmed up in this car and get going with this comparison. Alright, I'm out on the track, I have the tires heated up, and I just gotta say, this Formula Classic, it is very interesting. You can definitely tell there is a heavy turbo lag, similar to the Lotus 98T. Granted, this isn't the full, officially licensed Lotus 98T, but it's pretty darn close. And yeah, it's interesting because it is definitely a squirrely, slidey car, but at the same time, it's not at the ragged edge that I've come to sort of feel out of the Riza Studios Automobilista 1 cars. It's definitely manageable. It's definitely not throwing you out to the edge. It's oddly planted to the track in the same way that, unfortunately, I'd say that Project Cars 2 feels a little overly planted, in my opinion. Now, keep in mind, these are all my opinions, but it's yeah, it feels a little overly planted. Granted, if you do slam your right foot on the gas pedal, you will go around, but at the same time, it's just it feels a little overly planted. It feels a little conservative in some ways, where it's yeah, you feel that turbo coming on, but it's nothing that really instills a sense of fear in you, which is what I would definitely get with some examples of these cars in other sims. And yeah, it's a weird thing where, yeah, it's a little unnerving feeling just the way the car is and just the feeling the turbo come on, but at the same time, it's nothing that's truly terrifying me. So yeah, it's a weird mix. It's an interesting comparison as well because, yeah, this is an older era Formula 1 car, say from the late 80s, and it's something where, yeah, it's that crazy power, weird hybrid of aerodynamic grip and some mechanical grip. So it's an interesting way to test out multiple facets of the physics engine. And yeah, I just totally had my clutch slip as I missed a gear. So yeah, that can happen. Gotta be careful of that. But yeah, so Automobilista 2, the physics are interesting. So what I'm gonna do is, for the next stage of this comparison, I'm gonna jump over to Automobilista 2, then Project Cars 2, and then back to AMS 2 to share my final thoughts. Alright, so we're behind the wheel of the Formula Classic around Brands Hatch in the original Automobilista. So one of the things I was saying about AMS 2 was that the cars almost felt a little overly planted. So AMS 1, one of the biggest compliments I can give to it is the way it handles being on the edge of grip. So you get a really good sense of being on the edge of grip in AMS 1, sort of getting an idea of the limits of the car, going over it, and then you either understeer or oversteer. That's a sense that I'm feeling is kind of missing from AMS 2. And then one of the things that I really give a big compliment to for AMS 1 is the sense of what happens when you go into a slide. When you go into a slide, you can actually juggle the car and balance it on that edge. that's not something I've been able to really do well in AMS2. So when you're in a slide in AMS1, you can kind of get a feel for the car, but also it's a very ragged edge like you just saw. If you go over that edge too much, you are in trouble. But there is that edge, that fine line you can ride on. But in AMS2, it feels like basically you're almost glued in some ways, and it's a little sticky even when you're sliding around. When you slide around, it's something where like the second you start to counter steer, you just stick back on the track. You get back on course. You can't really ride the slide like you can in AMS1, and it's kind of disappointing because actually the rest of the physics elements in AMS2 are pretty close to AMS1, and I'm pretty surprised by that. It's actually a good feeling. But the one spot that AMS1 totally has AMS2 beat is the force feedback. The force feedback in AMS1, in my opinion, is some of the best and most intuitive in all of sim racing. It does an incredible job of communicating what the car is doing to you and what needs to be done. And AMS2 just feels a little vague in comparison. It still does a decent job of telling you what the car needs to be done, and like if you're about to go over the edge of grip in some ways, but AMS1's force feedback is just so much better. It really does make a significant difference. The feeling of the road texture is just that much more defined in AMS1. The feeling of riding the edge of the grip of the tires, so much better in AMS1. And it's something that I really hope Riza Studios can dial in for AMS2. So that's one of the things I'm definitely wondering about when it comes to the physics in AMS2 as it gets closer to release. How much is that force feedback going to be refined? But all things considered, in the terms of physics, it's not too far off. I'd say basically the behavior at the edge of grip is different, but apart from that, it is pretty similar. So yeah, without further ado, we are about to jump into Project Cars 2, which is basically almost like a spiritual brother to AMS2, and we'll see how it compares. Alright, so here I am behind the wheel of the Lotus 98T at Brands Hatch in Project Cars 2. So one of the things that I was honestly slightly concerned about when I was testing out AMS2, because I hadn't really tested out AMS or Project Cars 2 in a while, was that my concern was AMS2 would feel a little more to me like Project Cars 2 than AMS1. I'm pretty happy to say that's not really the case. I feel that Riza Studios has done a pretty solid job getting the physics of this madness engine over to a state that I feel can actually be closer to Automobilista than Project Cars 2. And it's interesting though, because Project Cars 2 out of the box has some of the worst force feedback out of most sim racing titles, in my opinion. So actually, I kind of went against a rule that I set for myself, no modifications. I downloaded a set of custom force feedback files for this direct drive wheel optimized from Race Department, and it actually feels a lot better. But the thing is, the underlying physics for Project Cars 2 just feels a little off still. It's not just the force feedback, it's just the physics feeling a little off. As I was mentioning with Automobilista 2, there's that bit of an element where you can't really get the car into a sustained slide. That is definitely still the case in Project Cars 2, just even more amplified than in Automobilista 2. And that's one of the things that's kind of frustrating. You can't get into a really good slide in Project Cars 2. So you can get the oversteer on the throttle, but it still just feels a little too planted. And that's just the common state of things for Project Cars 2, where everything just feels a little too planted. And it's like, yeah, you get into that little slide and yeah, it's just, you don't really feel it being that intuitive, which was definitely one of the biggest strengths of Automobilista. Everything felt intuitive. Not to mean easy, but intuitive. So that's one of the things that just feels the weirdest in Project Cars 2. And in Automobilista 2, there are a couple of those quirks, a couple of those things that I think do carry over from the Madness engine and makes Automobilista 2 feel a little weird. Now, it's not at the full extent of, say, what I'm feeling right now in Project Cars 2, but it is something that is slightly concerning. So yeah, it's a weird balance where, in my opinion, Automobilista 1 feels the best out of these three titles, and Project Cars 2 easily feels like the worst. It has some elements of the physics that just leave me scratching my head. But yeah, let's go back to Automobilista 2 and get on to my final thoughts. Alright guys, we are back behind the wheel in Automobilista, and we are just going to go on to my closing thoughts about this head-to-head comparison. So, Automobilista 2 is in an interesting position right now because of it switching over to a new game/physics engine. They've actually done a great job of showing what this Madness engine is capable of when given the proper love and effort that it kind of deserves. It really does take the driving experience and brings it to a step that is gladly above Project Cars 2. The cars feel a little more lively, a little more on edge, but there are a few of those elements that kind of have migrated over from the Project Cars 2 feely side of things that I'm hoping might be able to get tuned out. Basically, under the limit of grip, this actually feels pretty close to Automobilista 1, which is a great compliment in itself. However, once you get to that edge of grip, once you cross over it, that's when it starts rearing up the Madness engine, Project Cars 2Z feeling that people aren't really the greatest fan of. And that's one of my concerns. So it's like when you cross over that edge of grip, once you start getting into a slide, that's when things start going a little awry. That's when things start feeling a little weird. So in in Automobilista 2, you get that slide going and just a tiny bit of counter steer and you either get immediately back on track, or you just do like I just did and you get way too much grip and it sends you flying off in the other direction. So it's that sort of weird situation where the car feels a little too planted, and it's kind of unfortunate. Automobilista 1 handled slides and loss of grip really well, and right now, as it is, Automobilista 2 could learn a little bit from its older brother. So it's something where that needs to be dialed in. But for the other elements, like just driving and racing line, it feels a lot more natural than Project Cars 2, which is a great compliment to it. And yeah, it's making me excited, because the thing is, if they can dial in that weird feeling at the limit of grip, if they can dial that in, if they can make it a bit easier to maintain a slide, I think that could be a lot better. But until then, it's something where I will admit there are some elements of Project Cars 2 that have reared its head into AMS2. But for the most part, it feels really good and is on par with Automobilista 1. All they just really need to do is refine the physics and maybe add some more detail to the force feedback, and then I would easily be a happy customer. So yeah guys, those are kind of my thoughts on this kind of weird head-to-head comparison. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you feel like AMS is going more towards a Project Cars 2 route, or could it really do a great job filling in the steps of its predecessor? Let us know in the comments. Also, if you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, so you can help keep us on track. For the Sim Racing Paddock, I'm William Marsh, and thanks for watching.